people said he left a lot of money on the table. That was a horrible deal for him.
Really?
And we're live.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Op Show, where we bring you the trials and tribulations, automations, and collaborations from the world of DevOps and the developer experience. In our best show yet, we have Eric Muller, Director of Technology at Presence Product Group, amateur photographer, and new owner of a young Labrador Retriever puppy.
Yes.
Welcome, Eric. As a fellow lab owner, for the past 2 family dogs I've had, I'm really looking forward to your journey there as well.
Do you want a lab?
I've had 2 labs for their full lives with my family though, and now I've been trying to acquire a new dog friend for like the last 10 years, but it'll happen soon, I'm sure.
He's a handful. Since you already know how to handle him, I should send him out to you. He's a joy and a pain at the same time.
Food.
You shared the photo in the community channel, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
It's still in young puppy years. Here's the good news. At least it's not a Shiba Inu, because they're that way for their whole life.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, welcome, Eric, and
Thank you.
why don't you just jump in and tell us a little bit about your background and your journey in the tech sphere?
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. So I've been doing this for a while. I actually kind of resisted getting into technology. For whatever reason, I wanted to do other things. I had a computer as a kid. Played around with it a little bit in high school. Did some programming with BASIC. Studied photography, architecture, acting, and then eventually I said, don't resist. Let's get into it. You love it so much. So did technology, and studied in college, and then ended up working in financial services for a while. So Wells Fargo, Charles Schwab. Somewhere late 90s, early 2000s, I got into the consulting side. So I've been working for a variety of companies, Razorfish, Mechanism, Edelman, and I've been, for the last 7 years, I've been over at Presence. So we build a lot of different things for a lot of different folks, and so the cool thing about that is I get exposed to a lot of different technologies and work with a lot of great companies and great people. So it's been fantastic so far.
Well, yeah, that's great to hear. And here's that little bit of your photography right there, and the dog in the Slack community.
Love it. So cute.
Wonderful.
So cute.
Yeah.
I have a 10-year-old Shiba, and that's why I make that joke, because man, they just get more needy as they get older. I'll tell you what, I'd go back to a small 10-month-old puppy right now, rather than have what I call a cat dog.
I love that.
Yeah, brilliant.
Trade
Well, at least you can cut your dog's hair into, like a lion or a bear or a panda or something, right?
Yeah. Well, mine definitely has the very short hair, so there's no cutting of it. But he's just such an incredible handful. So it's there were definitely, when he was earlier, there were definitely nights where we didn't sleep. But as he gets older, it's really become a lot of fun.
Tell us a little bit more about the projects that you guys take on at Presence. I've looked at the website a little bit. As I understand it, there's a lot of great variety, as you're saying. Pretty full stack product strategy. Lay it out for us. What are the kind of some of the things you got your team's digging into?
So we do everything soup to nuts. So we do strategy and product management, and then when it comes time to the build, we'll start all the way at the our new website is coming soon, but anyways, we basically will build a little bit of everything. So we do DevOps, we do the back end, the front end. Our bread and butter is React and Node, but we do C#, we do Java, and then we do a lot of mobile stuff. Clients, we have some startups where we're like the full development team for them, and then we'll also show up at large organizations and help them expand their team. We're not a body shop, so it's like we become a part of their team, and we provide co-leadership. It's really great. Like I said, I think one of the best things about a company like this is that we're not working on the same product for 5, 6, 7 years, right? It's like every 6 months to a year, there's new stuff that's coming in. And so people are constantly exposed to new technologies, new businesses, get to meet new people. So it really kind of keeps it very interesting for everyone on the team.
I love that. I worked at a company called Blast Radius for many years, and very similar cadence of work. And what I really loved about it is I was able to cut my chops, I guess, as they say, on lots of different technologies. And because you were able to move into different projects, work with different teams, different stakeholders, you just got exposure to so much so quickly. And you learn to almost, in some ways, detach from your work a little bit. Like there's a lot of passion, let's do the best work. But at the same time, you understood how to prioritize your best work, because you would be moving on to the next project and the next project. And I think that was one of the most important lessons I had as a software engineer coming up, and I gained it from that kind of working style. Very different from, like you said, working on the same product for 7 years, which has its own merits, but definitely is a different learning style, right?
Yeah, I agree, and I think the other thing that I kind of like about it, as a people manager, is that you start to really think. You have to think more about the people that are working with you. I think that in some places, when I was at Schwab and I was more of a, not in the management capacity, I felt more like a cog in the machinery, right? Because we were doing one thing. We were basically supporting the bank, or we were supporting the brokerage house. So it's easier, I guess. It felt like, at the time, it was really easy for the company to just slot someone in, right? And I feel like now, because we're constantly changing our clients, that I want to make sure that folks are working really well together as a team, and that they are happy, right? Because I'm going to have new clients coming in, and I want them to see that these folks really enjoy the work, that they're passionate about it, that they're work well together, and that they can feel comfortable working with new folks. So that's been wonderful experience, very eye-opening, and it's still very important to me.
Yeah. One of the things I really liked about it as well was just not just the team, but like I call it full cycle development, where you actually get to see a project usually through kind of like full cycle, and then you almost get you get to start again. And I think about it like single player mode in a video game. Maybe it's like you die, you fail, whatever. You start again. Now you get to replay the learnings of the last cycle and the new cycle. And I think that's the kind of iteration, the meta iteration, that can be really powerful for a professional career, especially in software development, when so much of it is, to your point, not just relied on the technical work, but it's also how do I work with a team? How do I deliver on a vision? How do I deliver to a client? And those are some of the things that I think I got out of it personally in a really fine-tuned way.
Yeah, I agree. And I also, another thing is, you were talking about getting exposed to new things. I think what's cool is, oftentimes we're showing up at the beginning of a project, like you were saying, and so we can introduce new technologies. It's really great to have the team constantly exposed to new things, and really push the boundaries. But at the same time, we still have to deliver, right? So while we may be bringing new technologies to the client, the latest and greatest, we're not way out there on the cutting edge, right? What's the saying? Folks who live on the cutting edge bleed a lot. So we're aware of what's. Oh, that's a great one. Yeah. We're aware of what's down the pike, and we're looking at that and constantly, thinking about how can we incorporate that in. But we don't feel like, we have to do, like resume-driven development. It's like we still need to deliver for the client. We want to set them up for the future, but we don't have to limit ourselves to, something that's been legacy at that place for like 10 years or something like that. Yeah. So it's a nice combination.
That's great mentorship, because I've seen that a lot, the resume-driven development or the bleeding analogy. I like that a lot. I think, there's just this natural dichotomy in software development that's even more pronounced when you're in that kind of work cycle, where, I used to call it the death march. It's like, look, if you don't choose boring technology, we're going on a death march. And as much as I like to work my weekends, my evenings, like I love to work, don't get me wrong, but I like to work on things that are impactful. So let's make some clear decisions right now. So like you said, you guys stick mostly to your bread and butter. How do you then introduce those new things to the team and I guess harden them a bit so that they can enhance your portfolio of the skills that you bring to the customer. Because that's also your bread and butter, is showing them what is net new, but distilling it down so that it's easy for them to then consume it as well, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, a couple of ways. I mean, first of all, we're pretty committed to like a 40-hour work week. So, I'm not working people to death. And so, we're all passionate about what we do as technologists, but I want, someone's exploring technology on their own on their weekend. I want them to explore what they want to explore, not, I'm working them to death. And so folks are just naturally curious. They find new things, they bring it back in. We have a little bit of a brown bag every couple of weeks so we can talk about that stuff. The other thing that we do is, we have a pretty broad group of consultants, contractors that we can bring in to supplement the team. So we're about 50% employees, 50% consultants, and then this huge network of folks that we're constantly reaching out to, bringing in. And so if I need a particular skill set, I'll just tap into that network and bring them in. And as consultants, they're naturally pushing themselves, right? So it's like every project, I'm bringing in new people, right? So there's a foundation of people inside of the company, and then I bring in other folks. And, sometimes they become full-time employees. Sometimes they work for us for a while and go off and do something else and then come back later. And so it's just the ideas are fresh and they're constantly flowing in and they're moving out and coming back in. It's really, really a nice way to, grow.
Yeah, it's sort of an osmosis kind of effect is what I visualize in my head. I think it's really nice when you can get those almost competing interests to align really well. Like a consultant wants to be on the edge, somebody who's going to be maintaining the project longer term wants to be a little bit more conservative maybe. They have to find that means in the middle that makes the project work for everybody. But it's a great way to kind of set it up for success in an organic way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, that's why I think the 40-hour a week thing, and I guess I'm harping on this a little bit, but why that's so important to me, right? So, it's funny when I talk to people, maybe someone who's going to be working with me as a contractor for a little while, one of the first things I say to them is, I'm really only looking for you to work 40 hours a week. If you want to work 60 hours a week, you got to go somewhere else. But here, 40 hours, go home, enjoy your weekend, enjoy your family and friends. And I haven't yet to have someone say to me, geez, that sucks. I really wish I was working 60 hours a week. And I think, it's interesting. I like to say, I think my generation did a disservice. So I'm obviously older. I'm in my 50s. And I think my generation and the generation right after of technologists kind of did a disservice to this industry in that we basically perpetuated this idea that if you are passionate about being a developer, of course you want to work 80 hours a week. And in fact, we're doing you a favor by letting you take home the work and work on the weekend and feeding you in the office and blah, 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 and all that. And, and hackathons and stuff like that, right? And my wife is a medicine and she never, she doesn't bring home patients, right, to see them. She doesn't do medical-a-thons or anything like that. She loves what she does, but the fact that it's constrained and it's sustainable means that she can do it until she's done. And I feel like we have set up a situation where we're going to just burn out all of these young developers who are showing up and at the same time telling them that if they don't burn out, that they're doing something wrong with their career. And I think that's a real bummer.
I totally agree. One of the ways I think about this is I separate the software engineer in me from the entrepreneur in me. The entrepreneur in me is like, I'll work with you as long as you need to work, as hard as you need to work, because it's just built into me to try to get ahead. And that's sort of the entrepreneur side, right? That doesn't mean I expect others to do it. And in fact, when I think about the developer in me, what I want is, I want to work smart, not hard. I want to make good decisions. I want high leverage decisions. I want to stay lean. I think there's a couple of disservices there that would be interesting to unpack and get your feedback on. The first is some of that was actually absorbed into the developer community through the entrepreneur sort of passion and founder mindset of these startups, right? We have to acknowledge that. Hustle culture is not that cool, but thanks, Gary Vee, this is where we're at. On the other side, you have the sort of developer model, and I think what I really focus on is more of that. And I think part of what we've done that is a disservice is in recent years. I don't know if I can accredit this to historic generations, but in recent years, I think we've actually made technology so much more complicated than it ever was before. And so now
Oh, yeah.
we have a higher overhead. I remember when I started 20 years ago in software development, FTP, PHP, a little bit of JavaScript and iframes, like we're good to go, right? It's like one iteration past GeoCities, but now you got these distributed systems. How do you manage that conversation, right? Because I think there's some real insight that can be derived there that is kind of perpetuating part of this. Like, if I can't complete it in 40 hours a week, what decisions led me there? What decisions did I inherit that led me there?
Yeah, no, those are good questions. I mean, one thing I want to touch on really quickly around the entrepreneurship, I feel like I do want people who are passionate about what they do, but I don't want to burn them out so they lose that passion.
Yeah.
And that's the key for me, right? I love someone who's coding on the weekends, but they should be doing their own thing if they want to do that. I don't own them. Okay. That's really key to me.
Yeah.
And I think, getting back into the idea around the complexity, I think that there is, I remember when I started, when I used to be a full-time developer, like you, I was on PHP. Actually, I started in Perl. So I was actually a Perl half back in the day. Yeah. But, it was a lot simpler, right? It was a bash script or it was a makefile. And subversion or something like that, right? We were, and we would FTP up into the server, and I think that stuff was too simple, and so we started adding some complexity. And I think at first it was necessary complexity, but I think one of the things that sort of happened is we didn't do enough to mentor people as they came along. So think about like a lot of the the boot camps, where it's like, we're going to bring you in and in 6 weeks, we're going to show you a bunch of quick technologies, but we're not going to give you any depth underneath it all. I'm going to show you these tools. And so these people come out of it. And I've worked with some folks that have come out and are passionate, great developers and do fantastic work. But that's because they got some mentoring, they got some seasoning. But a lot of these folks come out and they don't get that. And so all they have are these tools in front of them. And so they start looking around for similar tools and they start building these very complex things, because they don't know the history. They don't understand there was something that came before it. There was a blog post, in fact, recently, I wish I could remember what it was, where they were talking about there's almost this move nowadays to going back to the 90s, right? Have you noticed like server-side rendering is starting to become a thing? And, like that's huge, right? Or this idea that, DevOps is sort of, we were talking before the show, but like DevOps is sort of starting to shift to becoming like system administration again, right? Like this is a specialized skill set. Let's own that and start to clean it up and take away the unnecessary complexity. And so that gives me a lot of hope and happiness, right? It's like, we see the complexity, we see the fragility, and how can we clean it up? And maybe we're rediscovering things that were in existence 20 years ago, but I mean, if the old is new again, or if the old becomes new again, that's okay.
That's so interesting. So in the last episode that we recorded, which I think just came out today, with Sadie, Tristan and I were talking to Sadie about these ideas of learning loops and unconscious learning, conscious learning, etc. There's sort of like 4 loops. She articulated it way better than I could, so I suggest checking that video out. But this makes me think about this macro environment, this macro learning loop that we as an industry are going through. And it's interesting to me how early it is actually in internet technology. We're probably only on like the second of the third and fourth learning, the second learning loop here. So we're now going through those same scenarios. I do think that where we're at right now very much represents the early stages of the internet, but it's just abstracted. Like the cloud providers are now like the kernel. And Kubernetes is like, we're trying to figure out how to build a UI for the kernel. And, in many ways, Kubernetes and containers are kind of like the Windows 95 for, Pirates of Silicon Valley. So it makes me hopeful too. I mean, I think that's an interesting way of rationalizing it and not getting too tied up in it at the same time. Yeah, I agree. And Kubernetes is such a fascinating example. Like I have a love-hate relationship with it. I feel like there are scenarios where it makes such perfect sense, and I'm so happy it exists, right? Like my world is a better place because of it. But there's other times where I'm like, dude, seriously, Kubernetes for this? Like it's 2 containers and a database. Like we don't need this whole fancy, structure set up to support that.
And I think what we're starting to see is people who are like just burning out on this idea of, do I really need to make this so complex to get my job done?
Yeah.
I'm put in mind, there's a developer that we work with occasionally. The guy is in his early 70s, and he's one of the best developers I've ever worked with.
Cool.
He just cranks code. He's a great React developer. And I think part of what makes him so good is that, when I was, waddling around in diapers, he was getting his first job. And so he's felt all the pain, right? And so when he joins a team, he's immediately sharing that pain with everyone, and in a very positive way. It's not like, oh, you can't do that. Like he's, the classic graybeard. It's more like, great idea. That's cool. Have you thought about doing it this way? Let's try this. And it's really nice having that kind of experience with that kind of attitude.
Right.
And I wish every developer was able to work with someone like that.
I love that so much. I think there's so much to be learned from all the things that didn't work. All the deploying on Fridays and working 70 hours a week, where on some ways I look back and, I'm a fairly young guy, but I've been through a lot of these pains, and that's what's led me to these practical and minimalist conclusions. I look at people like Kelsey Hightower, whose Twitter has been updated for the first time in 7 years to just say minimalist, because he, even though he's like this big Kubernetes advocate, minimalism. He's like minimalism. Going back to this idea of like the 40-hour work week and the mentorship, how do you think you balance that, right? Because I certainly wouldn't want to see anybody work themselves to the point of burnout, but that friction that occurs when you make some of these mistakes, when you sort of have the repercussions sometimes of making some of these mistakes. I remember times at Blast Radius where I might be there on Friday night with the QA team because I pushed really buggy code and picked the wrong decisions and allocated my things in the wrong places. That taught me important lessons, which unfortunately I had to learn by staying late on a Friday night instead of going out with my friends. But how do you think you balance that within the 40-hour work week for people and provide them that environment that's both safe, supportive, doesn't burn them out, but gives them some of those painful lessons that they can get from people who are more experienced than them, but sometimes they have to kind of really see it themselves,
Yeah, well, I mean, people are going to make mistakes, and part of what helps is, with a 40 as a consultancy, I want everyone billing, right? So, any hours where someone's not billing is a bad hour. But if someone makes a mistake, well, let me take a step back from that. So one of the ways that we make sure that we kind of backstop this is that, like, for developers, when they're working on a project, we do pull requests and proper reviews of all of the pull requests, right? And so right away, the ideal situation is, my code lands, I have 2 other developers who are reviewing the code. And so, things are caught before it lands into main. And then, we do a lot of testing, so a lot of unit tests, a lot of integration tests. And so that really helps, right? So that as a developer is writing something, ideally it will be captured even before they do the pull request. We do a lot of informal pair programming. I don't believe in like 8-hour day, 5-day a week pairing, but I really like, developers reach out to each other. So I encourage that. Hey, do you have a problem? Time box yourself. Spend an hour on it. You don't have a solution, find someone else to help you out with it. And if mistakes are made, it's like roll it back and fix it. There is no perfect programming. Developers are going to come in, they're going to try something out, they're going to make a mistake. As long as production hasn't broken or we haven't fallen behind on our contractual obligations, then, it's deal with it. I'm not going to get upset. It's interesting, like in the COVID-19 time, I think the best thing that I could do, but this really kind of really is reinforced in COVID-19, is like, we're not saving lives, right? We're not, what we do, it's very rare for what we do as developers that someone will die if we get it wrong. And if you are working in that industry or that segment of the industry, if you're working in, supporting a hospital or a drug company or something like that, the nature of your work, right? So don't take it so seriously, right? Be passionate about it, want to get it right. But you know what? If we don't get it out at the end of today, we can pick it up again tomorrow. it's okay. And I think people need to hold on to that, that you can take a step back, think about it, get it right, enjoy your weekend, finish it Monday.
Like it.
Yeah, that brings up a good point too, like what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, where, how do you think about this like enjoyment of work and then creating this sort of work environment with this giant switch to remote, especially for development or DevOps teams? And now all of a sudden you're doing all this and you're kind of forced into this work environment. Like, how do you think about, shaping that culture or reshaping it so that it fits for the new normal?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think that a lot of people, first of all, let me say this. I don't think every person is suited to working remotely. And what I mean by that is, some folks just thrive on being around other people. So that's a challenge right there. Like, how do we keep people engaged? Those people engaged, right? Where they feel like they're a part of the team. So, for me, it's, a lot of checking in with people. I make sure that there's plenty of time. Everyone has, the afternoons. I'm going to leave them alone when they're working remote, but otherwise I'll take advantage of the mornings. Hey, how's it going? We'll get on Slack. I'll have a conversation with folks, post inside of public channels. I reach out to folks on a regular basis, on a daily basis, different people, not everyone on the team, but different people, and kind of check in with them. I like having meetings, like these brown bag meetings, where we're getting together remotely, but we're getting to chat. And I keep it very loose, right? It's like, technically we're going to explore a new idea. We're going to talk about some technologies, but it's like also just an opportunity for people to just BS if they want to.
Yeah. Are you using, so what are you using for communication? Are you using Slack or?
We use Slack and Zoom.
Okay.
So Slack for day-to-day, and we'll do Slack, calls, and we'll also do Zoom for group calls.
Yeah, I appreciate the informality that Slack brings. I feel like I've been reflecting on it recently, as we're pretty much a Slack first, Slack only company where we rarely use email. And, there's just this level of connection that can come on a remote environment that wouldn't come on Slack, that wouldn't come in email.
Right. I agree. I think the problem with Slack, I love Slack, don't get me wrong, and things like Slack, but the problem with Slack is it demands your attention all the time. And so one of the things I encourage the developers, because I give permission to, and I feel like, a lot of the developers feel like when Slack is there, they always have to be connected all the time. And then if they get a message from anyone, they have to respond to it. And I'm like, no. I used to code, and I know you need 3, 4, 5 hours uninterrupted to crank. So you know what? Mute Slack, put it on another screen, turn it off altogether. Get that focus time. If I'm
setting
really
that clear expectation.
Exactly. If I'm that panicked, I need your attention, I'll phone you up.
We try to set 3 days a week. It usually turns out to be 2 because of different reasons, but we try to set 3 days a week, which we call focus days, which are not, even before we had moved to more of a remote model, even in the office, we try to do that and allow people to go off site if they want to or whatever, because that is so important. Were you guys co-located before all this and now remote now? And if so, what's the feedback from the team? Do they feel they're more productive in this setting, less productive? I think we've gotten really positive feedback that people feel like the focus time is locking in more. They're getting more out of their communications and then being able to go back and deliver on things. But I mean, how are you guys? What's the feedback you're hearing?
The feedback overall is positive, and the same things. They feel a little bit more productive. They feel like they can focus, but they also miss, the way we did it was we were co-located, and most folks were in the office 2 or 3 days a week, so we weren't looking for 5 days a week. Some folks were, though, 5 days a week. And so they miss the occasionally getting in the office a couple times a week together. We would do lunch twice a week and everyone was there for that. And so they miss that casual hanging out together. You don't get that working remote. You don't get that where we just start BSing over a cup of coffee. That experience doesn't happen. And I think that's the part that everyone misses. And that's the hardest thing I think to replicate.
Yeah, we've tried to inject that in just like with social hours and different lunch. You know, we have a standing lunch thing for people.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's definitely not the same. It's sort of a proxy for the real thing, unfortunately, while the world is the way it is.
Yeah, it's the thing is that when I'm thinking about when I was in the office, if two developers start chatting about a problem, they're just at their desk and they're talking, and a third person happens over here as they're walking by, they'll just join in, and next thing you know, a problem is solved, and you don't have that experience in Slack, unfortunately.
Yeah, spontaneous collaboration. Yeah, what you do usually becomes more like a pile-on thing because everybody hears it.
Yeah. We've been using a tool. I don't know. Have you ever used Donut? And I guess once your team gets large enough, maybe where certain people don't interact, or there's different, business functions, it automatically pairs you up with someone else that maybe you haven't been interacting with as much with on Slack. And that's been I've personally really enjoyed it for just quick 30-minute chats with a different person every week that you wouldn't normally interface with as much.
No, I haven't tried that, but I just took a note, so I will check it out after this call.
We also use called Geekbot for stand-ups, and we inject kind of like funny questions throughout the week, so people kind of answer kind of like these teasers that you wouldn't otherwise know about them. Things like, I think today's was, what's the most dangerous situation you've ever been in? Something like that. So that's another good one, Geekbot. Yeah.
Oh, I'll definitely check that one out too. Cool.
Well, I know we have a hard stop here with you, Eric. So, any last thoughts that you wanted to share? Any thoughts on security? And then where can we find you online?
Any last thoughts? I guess the one last thought that I would have is, I want people to enjoy what they do inside of technology. You should be passionate and you should enjoy it. You should love it. And that means sometimes being able to say no. Don't overextend yourself. Don't agree to everything and then you regret it, right? You're not able to deliver. So, take care of yourself, right? And particularly in a time like this, just make sure you're taking care of yourself. As far as online, I think I'm like EKM on Twitter, or EK Muller or something like that. I worked for 4 years at a social media agency, and I do not like my online presence. So I can be found on LinkedIn under my name, Eric Muller, and that's about it.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you again for coming on. I appreciate the conversation. Very, very good to have about how to love your work and love your team and set that environment in the right way. And that's it for us at the Ops Show. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.